and welcome to another episode of Greedy Keeps, brought to you by Moderately Anonymous MTG, the greatest cEDH channel in the multiverse. As always, this episode is brought to you by TCG Player. Hit that TCG Player affiliate link in the description to pick up any of the cards that you see in today's video. It's a great way to help out the channel. If you want to get an official Modanon playmat, make sure you pick one up through our Inked Gaming affiliate link. Want to make sure your cards stand out at the EDH table? Use our affiliate link to grab some altar sleeves and use code MODANONMTG at checkout for 5% off your order. And we're also partnered with Dragon Shield. Pick up the greatest card sleeves and TCG accessories in the multiverse and support the show. Make sure to visit our merch store to get some official Modanon merch. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, crew necks, and more with original Modanon designs. All of these links are in the video description below. And thank you to all of our patrons who make great content like this possible. Become a patron to enjoy Patreon exclusive content, give direct support to the channel, join our Patreon Discord, and even get your deck featured on the show. And remember, if you enjoy this video, it helps out a lot to click that like and subscribe button. It's one of the best ways to support the channel, and everyone is highly appreciated. Hey everybody, what's up? It's me, Dan, Moderately Anonymous MTG, and we are here for another edition of Greedy Keeps. Today you will see that there is no one here beside me because we are taking a look at my own deck today. We have got Kess Dissident Mage that we're looking at. If you're unfamiliar with Kess, this is a Turbo Ad Nauseam deck. We are looking to land a lot of fast mana really early, pump up our hand with lots of card advantage, and then end the game with Thassa's Oracle combos or Underworld Breach combos. And basically there's just a couple of things that we're looking for in our opening hands, sort of a few pillars of the kinds of cards that we want, and they are mana that we can accelerate our game plan with, card advantage spells, namely things like Ad Nauseam or Wheel of Fortune effects, more abundant card advantage sources than, say, things like Brainstorm, and tutors to put all of our combos together at the last final piece. So let's just hop right into it. Let's take a look at this hand that we got right here in front of us. We've got a Gemstone Caverns, a Felwar Stone, a Tainted Pact, Crack the Vault, which is a Grim Tutor, Rhystic Study, Mindbreak Trap, and Red Elemental Blast. Recently, I've just taken Peer into the Abyss out of this deck as a backup advantage source and replaced it with the Grim Tutor as the hip move to be making these days. And I'll definitely tell you that I haven't missed hitting 7s off of my Ad Nauseam. I have sort of missed Peer into the Abyss as a backup card advantage spell later in the game when Ad Nauseam is not as effective. But so far I like Grim Tutor a lot. But looking at this hand, presuming that we are not in first and that our Gemstone Caverns is live, I think that this hand is like not a great keep, but I would think about it if we had a second land to play a turn 1 Felwar Stone, hold up Red Elemental Blast or Mindbreak Trap into a turn 2 Rhystic Study, say if either the Tainted Pact or the Grim Tutor were a land. But as it stands, at a first 7, this is certainly not aggressive enough. We want really aggressive 7s. If we're keeping a 7, it's gotta be the absolute nuts. And this is like fine, but not what we're looking for. This is a deck that we can really aggressively mulligan with. I've won games at mulling down to a single card. I've won a game mulling down to 2 cards. This is a deck that we can really bounce back from because, again, what we're looking for is a turn 1 to 2 Wheel of Fortune or Ad Nauseam. So we're always looking to maximize the amount of cards that we have in our hand, but we don't necessarily need to start the game with a maximum amount of cards to make that happen. So let's take a look at a second 7. Second 7 here is Steam Vents, Demonic Consultation, Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, Unsubstantiate, Ledger Shredder, and Underworld Breach. This is just, we can't cast up any of our spells, nothing we got going on here, so this is an easy ship. Our 6 is a Scalding Tarn, Steam Vents, Misty Rainforest, Jewel Lotus, a Grim Monolith, a Delay, and a Rhystic Study. So, we've got a turn 3 Rhystic Study, if we wanted it. We've got a Grim Monolith that we could cast on turn 2. We've got the Jeweled Lotus. I think if I were going to think about keeping this, which I wouldn't because it doesn't really pan out, I would bottom the Delay. But yeah, this isn't aggressive. This doesn't have a sticking point to it. There's no massive advantage spell that we can land. Like, a Rhystic Study is a really great card. Playing one on curve on turn 3 in this deck is very unacceptable, I guess, is what I'm going to say. We want to do something much more aggressive. So let's go ahead and take a look at our 5. 5 is a Glimmer Void, Steam Vents, Cut Down, Ponder, a Gitaxian Probe, a Daze, and a Windfall. So, at a 5, this isn't bad. I could see bottoming cut down and ponder. And then we've got Gitaxian Probe to try to draw into some sort of acceleration. We've got a Daze to protect a Windfall. But seeing as we're not really closing the gap with what we've got in our hand, I think I might be more comfortable going to a 4 than trying to keep this 5. And I guess more realistically, I would bottom cut down and Daze and try to spike some fast mana off of either Gitaxian Probe or the Ponder here. But I think the odds are kind of against us. Let's just take a look at a fresh 7. We'll go to 4. So our 4 is Watery Grave, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mana Confluence, Forbidden Orchard, Odawara, Soaring City, a Chrome Mox, and an Unsubstantiate. If there was a singular action spell in this, I would feel pretty comfortable keeping this. Like if any of these lands were an action spell, we'd be pretty close to something here. Being able to cast Kess and then cast things out of our graveyard is a really big boon for this deck. But this isn't quite there. Let's go to 3 and see what we got. Our 3 is a Misty Rainforest, a Spire of Industry, a Crack the Vaults, Grim Tutor, an Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song, Mystic Remora, and a Daze. So at a 3, I'm pretty inclined to just keep Misty Rainforest, either Offer or Swan Song, and then Mystic Remora as our 3rd card. We could think about keeping the Daze in order to protect our Mystic Remora, because in a position like this, we really need this Mystic Remora to land, where we're mulling down to 3 in this situation. But I think, I don't know, there's strong points to be made for either Swan Song or an Offer You Can't Refuse. An Offer You Can't Refuse mainly because we can use it as ramp on our own spells if we do happen to draw like a Chrome Mox, a Mox Opal, or anything off the top during the first turn cycle, or maybe even the second turn cycle. It's possible that we can spike some extra mana to hold our Mystic Remora longer. But yeah, I think in this situation, I think the safest bet is to just go Misty Rainforest, Mystic Remora, and then Daze to protect our Remora, because, like I said, we really need that to land. So this isn't the bomb 3 that we could be getting, that is just like land, Crypt, and Wheel of Fortune. But this is fine. This is a defensible 3. Just for the sake of it being greedy keeps, though, let's take a look at what a 2 is. 2 is Bloodstained Mire, Chain of Vapor, Mystical Tutor, Spell Pierce, Thassa's Oracle, Rhystic Study, and Intuition. That's a thumbs down. I'm glad that we kept it 3. All right, let's take a look at a fresh 7 here. Fresh 7 is Odawara, Soaring City, Bloodstained Mire, Lion's Eye Diamond, a Spire of Industry, Rain of Filth, Cut Down, and a Brain Freeze. So we've got 2 pieces of our combo for Underworld Breach here with the Lion's Eye Diamond and the Brain Freeze. We have got no discernible momentum to bring us towards finding that or doing it very quickly. We've got a Rain of Filth, which is helpful on turn 3, but turn 3 is pretty far out. Rain of Filth is the kind of spell that we want to find off of an Ad Nauseam or a Wheel of Fortune, not a spell that we hang on to in our opening hand until we're ready to go. Basically, we sort of always want to be in the mindset that we're going to be changing the composition of our hand when we're playing a Turbo Ad Nauseam deck, or a deck like Kess in particular. We want to really be cycling through our deck with Wheel of Fortune effects, or just adding an abundance of cards on top of our opening hand with Ad Nauseam. So this has got some good pieces in it, but also, to be fair, the good pieces that we have, the quote-unquote good pieces, are Brain Freeze and Lion's Eye Diamond, which Lion's Eye Diamond is a fantastic spell. No notes, love Lion's Eye Diamond. Brain Freeze, absolute dead slot. I hate this card. It's very good at winning the game, but it's also fairly good with Kess. I've cast it in Kess just for value before, just to get some extra looks off the top of our library, some extra like action in the graveyard with Kess. But it's not the kind of card that you want to see in your opening hand. We've basically already gone to 6 in this hand, and looking at the other 6 cards, we've just got no momentum. So we're going to go to second 7 here. Second 7 is Exotic Orchard, Bloodstained Mire, Fire of Industry, Felwar Stone, a Rain of Filth, a Chain of Vapor, and a Daze. No, we've got Felwar Stone on turn 2. It's not fast enough for this deck, though. This is not quite where we want to be. And again, no action spell, so it's not really a hand that we can consider keeping. Our 6 is a Watery Grave, a Misty Rainforest, a Soul Ring, Talisman of Creativity, a Reanimate, a Gitaxian Probe, and a Chain of Vapor. So this hand is pretty dang close. We've got turn 1 Soul Ring into Talisman to set us up for having between 4 and 5 mana on turn 2, depending on whether or not we want to keep a second land, or if we happen to draw one off the top. The main problem that I have with this hand is that we don't have any true action. We have a Gitaxian Probe, we have a singular redraw, we've got some defense and Chain of Vapor, and we've got, again, Reanimate is more of a card that we want to see later on in the game that we've picked up along the way, and not one that we want to necessarily see in our opening hands. So if this is our 6 that we were going to keep, I would bottom that Reanimate. This is very, very close, but the thing is, I think I consider this hand a little bit of a trap, because while we do have an abundance of refueling sources in our deck, we're running Time Twister, we're running Wheel of Fortune, Wheel of Misfortune, and Windfall, we're running Ad Nauseam, we're no longer running Pierce, so we're down to like our 5 main advantage sources, but we're just like packed to the brim with tutors, and it's very easy to take this hand and be like, okay, we've got all the mana that we've ever need, and now we just need to draw the action. But the thing is, we really want to be aggressively attacking the board, so we're betting on basically our first couple of draws to be one of those 5 advantage sources, because even in the place where we find ourselves maybe drawing a Vampiric Tutor on turn 2, that means we're setting up to win on turn 3, which is kind of slow, and we could do better than that. And there's also just the chance that we don't find any of those things. You know, like, we've got a lot of mana in this deck, and we've got a lot of counters and interaction spells that don't necessarily translate to being action. So it's a very risky keep. If you're going to keep this, I don't think that I would. I think I would rather go to 5. It's very, very close. The Soul Ring into Talisman is very tempting, but I don't think that we're going to do it. Let's go ahead and take a look at our 5. Our 5 is Morphic Pool, Mana Crypt, Lion's Eye Diamond, Dark Ritual, Reanimate, Force of Negation, and a Force of Will. This is an extremely tempting hand. At 5, I'm closer to keeping this. But again, we've got no way to draw any cards. Like the Gitaxian Probe in any one of these slots, I might be a lot more inclined to do it, specifically because of the Lion's Eye Diamond and being able to more easily cast Kess. But I don't know if we can keep this in this situation. I think we're going to try to take a look at a 4 here. So at a 4, we've got Bloodstained Mire, Jeweled Lotus, a City of Traders, a Morphic Pool, a Flooded Strand, Red Elemental Blast, and a Simian Spirit Guide. So this is the turn 1 Kess, which is fine. We've got no particular momentum forward, but having a Kess on board is pretty okay at a 4. I think I might still be inclined to go to a 3 at this state. So if we were going to keep a 4, we could keep Jeweled Lotus, 2 lands, and a Simian Spirit Guide maybe, or maybe we just go Jeweled Lotus, land, Red Elemental Blast, Simian Spirit Guide, because at least we have some sort of protection, or some sort of way to possibly not die in the Red Elemental Blast. But it's not particularly enticing. Let's take a look at a 3. For a 3, we've got Gemstone, Mine, Ancient Tomb, Morphic Pool, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Windfall, and a Force of Negation. So this is a snap keep. This is exactly what we want to see. We're going to keep Morphic Pool, Ancient Tomb, and Windfall, because at the end of the day, this is what this deck is all about. We just want to find quick ways to spit out mana and refuel our hand, and then try to win on turn 2 or 3, possibly turn 1. I've won on turn 1 a few times before, but it's just easier with that extra first turn of setup of being able to deploy Soul Rings, Mana Vaults, etc., and things like that. But yes, this is a perfect hand, and not only are we going to refuel our own hand with this Windfall, but we're also going to disrupt the plans of our opponents, which is, I think, a very understated part of the Wheel of Fortune effects. Wheel of Fortune effects, Windfall effects, very risky. They're very risky cards. Drawing your opponents 7 cards apiece, 21 cards across the table that aren't your cards, is a dangerous proposition. But what decks like Kess and other Turbo Naus decks are betting on is the fact that we're able to utilize our 7 cards more aggressively and like mainly more quickly than any other deck at the table is able to do. So we're going to be giving up none of these cards in this hand, actually. We're going to not be discarding any of the cards in this hand. So normally thinking about like things like losing a Dark Ritual, losing Cabal Ritual, not losing them because, again, we always have access to things in our graveyard with various Underworld Breach and just Kess herself. But we need to also be thinking about how we transition our mana after these wheels into more things. So in this situation, we've got all of the abundance of all of our fast mana. Mana Crypt, Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, all of the free ones, all of the 1 mana ones. Those ones are all super live to be able to transition us into more action. This is also leaving us in a place where we have got, on turn 3, we'll be going into having 2 colors and an Ancient Tomb if we hit a land drop off of our Windfall, which is like fairly likely. We're on 26 lands in this deck, which seems very low. The individual probability of drawing cards off of the top of your deck is very low, which is what we want because we want to be drawing action. But the thing about this deck is that we're not banking on drawing 1 card at a time, right? We're banking on drawing 7 cards at a time. We're banking on drawing 20 cards with Ad Nauseam at a time. So the individual draws that we hit off the top, we don't want them to be lands for the most part. We want to save that for when we're accruing the chunk of resources through the Windfall effects. So this is a great keep at 3. Let's go ahead and take a look at a fresh 7. Okay, so fresh 7 here. We've got a Mana Confluence, a Talisman of Creativity, a Wishclaw Talisman, a Pact of Negation, a Brain Freeze, a Rite of Flame, and an Underworld Breach. This is the kind of hand that I would have to sit down and tank quite a bit and think about pod composition, think about placement at the table, what seating position that we're in, because this is extremely close. If the Rite of Flame was a Mana Crypt, for instance, if we could turn 1 Mana Confluence, Mana Crypt, Talisman of Creativity, and cast our Wishclaw Talisman off of Mana Confluence and the Creativity, this would be a super duper snap keep. We just Wishclaw Talisman for our LED on turn 2, and we've got Pact of Negation back up. The way this sits in this hand currently, we're going to presumably Mana Confluence, cast a Rite of Flame, so we can cast our Talisman of Creativity is one way we can go about it, and then turn 2 we can do the Wishclaw and set up for a turn 3. Alternatively, no, I guess actually that's pretty much the only way forward with this hand. Given these specific 7 cards, we would have to like draw another land source off the top if we wanted to slow roll the Rite of Flame. So this is it's setting up for a turn 3 Underworld Breach win with Pact of Negation backup, but it's only 1 piece of protection. It's hoping that we hang on to all of these cards that are in our hand that don't really do anything unless they're winning. And in the situation where any of these pieces get countered, pretty much shit out of luck, and there's not a whole lot that we can do. So I think even though this hand looks super, super juicy and very enticing, I think that this is a fairly easy ship. Let's go take a look at a second 7 here. Second 7, we've got Command Tower, Verdant Catacombs, Mana Confluence, Rain of Filth, Grim Tutor, a Cyclonic Rift, and a Dockside Extortionist. So we want to set it for big things. This is what we've established so far. Dockside Extortionist is a very big thing. Depending on pod composition, I might snap keep this. I recognize that there's no protection in hand, but Dockside Extortionist plus a Grim Tutor plus a Rain of Filth is a ton of mana, and it gets us the action spell that we need. So I have to think again about pod composition, about seating arrangement, because we need our Dockside Extortionist to pay off big time. We need to hit probably like roughly 6-ish mana on turn 2. I would want to be making between Dockside and Rain of Filth. We could potentially be hitting Dockside for 5 on turn 2, and that would be okay, because then we have Rain of Filth to make an additional mana by sacrificing both of our lands. But in that situation, that means we have 3 mana for our post-Grim Tutor spell, which is probably going to be like a Wheel of Fortune effect. So I think that that's not quite there. If we could really bank on making more mana than that, if we waited another turn, waited until turn 3 to try to pick up some interaction, and then also have a 3rd land on board for that Rain of Filth, that means that we can much more easily go for an Ad Nauseam. Without protection, it's not the best. A turn 3 Ad Nauseam is fine, but with no particular protection that we already have assured in hand, it's a little bit risky. I think, again, this looks pretty good, looks pretty close. I think there are probably other Kess players in the world who would keep this hand, but I think that we can do better than this. Let's go to 6. For a 6, we've got Polluted Delta, Felwar Stone, Reanimate, Tainted Pact, Mental Misstep, Dress Down, and Wheel of Misfortune. So we've got our Wheel of Misfortune that we'd very much like to transition new cards into, but only one land, only a Felwar Stone as our mana ramp in this hand, so this one isn't going to do it. Let's go to a 5. Alright, at 5 we've got a Jeweled Lotus, a Scalding Tarn, Forbidden Orchard, a City of Traders, a Praetor's Grasp, a Daze, and an Unsubstantiate. This one's another one that's pretty close because Praetor's Grasp is another very fine to fantastic. Yeah, I put it in that range. Fine to fantastic action spell. It finds, we can utilize almost any of like a lot of popular decks win cons in our deck or advantage spells, and like at the end of the day, like if we had to Praetor's Grasp for like a Ristic Study or something, that's not the worst thing in the world. The thing that is the worst thing in the world is that this hand doesn't really have any acceleration to get us to that point of making Praetor's Grasp for a value spell, like Ristic Study, for instance, a very valuable payoff. So I don't think that this one quite gets us there. Our Daze is, of course, live because we have our Scalding Tarn. Jeweled Lotus is pretty good, but we're with this current mana configuration, we're waiting until turn 3 to cast our Praetor's Grasp. We could turn 1 land, turn 2 land, Jeweled Lotus, cast Kess. Turn 3 we Praetor's Grasp, and then turn 4 that means we also have Praetor's Grasp live. And then if this is our 6, I think I would probably keep the Daze, but it's a little bit slow. I think that we could probably do better. Let's go ahead and take a look at a 5. 5 is still really juicy in this deck, in my opinion. This is not a great 5, but let's take a look. Mox Opal, Forbidden Orchard, Arid Mesa, Tainted Pact, an Offer You Can't Refuse, Gitaxian Probe, and a Dragon's Rage Channeler. So this is an interesting hand because, like I said before, an Offer You Can't Refuse is a really good ramp spell in this deck. We've got a lot of free spells, and Mox Opal is the perfect thing to chuck to, to throw under the bus of the Offer You Can't Refuse in this situation, because we're pretty far off from Metalcraft unless we offer like our Gitaxian Probe, in which case our Mox Opal makes mana probably 1 time because we're going to have to sacrifice our other treasures, which are giving it Metalcraft, to be able to do anything with it. So in this situation, we could be keeping, at a 5 here, we could be keeping Arid Mesa, or we could basically be bottoming Forbidden Orchard and a Tainted Pact. Forbidden Orchard, it depends on pod composition. It depends on how well other players at the table can utilize the Forbidden Orchard. If it is turn 2 or 3, I don't mind playing out Forbidden Orchard and giving away a couple of Timid Attackers or whatever it may be. But if we are committing our land turn 1 as Forbidden Orchard, that means that we're going to have to deal with the consequences of these spirit tokens for a little while, which is never really where I want to be. So I think we might bottom Forbidden Orchard and maybe the Tainted Pact. I can understand why people would want to hang on to the Tainted Pact here, but I think the line that I'm thinking of would be Arid Mesa, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Turn 2, we can Gitaxian Probe actually on turn 1, get our DRC trigger, make sure that we're filtering our turn 2 draw, which can be kind of nice. And then turn 2, we're open to Mox Opal and Offer, and then ramping that little bit of extra mana, and filtering some more cards off the top. But again, these aren't great game actions. These aren't refueling our hand. Dragon's Rage Channeler is another card that, like, it reads like it plays well on turn 1. But in reality, we would much rather be aggressively sticking pieces onto the board. Dragon's Rage Channeler is a much better thing to have later on in the game, post-Breach, or maybe even just a little bit further into our mana development. Have, like, hinging our game plan on the DRC Surveil triggers and filtering the worst stuff off the top that we don't need. It tends to not be a great game plan. I've recently taken Grinding Station out of this deck. Grinding Station is a great card, really great at dumping things out of your library, but is a little bit clunky. It turns on Metalcraft, which is nice, but it's not a great card altogether. Dragon's Rage Channeler is a little bit more palatable in the fact that it can be cast off of red mana, which is one of our easy ritual colors, and can be cast off of just like a Simian Spirit Guide and really like get the ball rolling post Ad Nauseam or post Underworld Breach. But as it stands, I don't think that this is a great one. Let's go ahead and take a look at a 4. So at our 4, we've got Misty Rainforest, Jeweled Lotus, Scalding Tarn, Ad Nauseam, Pact of Negation, Daze, and Rite of Flame. This is pretty darn close because we've got 3 mana and an Ad Nauseam, so we need to make up 2 mana along the way. Which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a huge chunk. We've got a Daze live, we've got a Pact of Negation. If we wanted to keep that over with the Jeweled Lotus or something like that, I think that we're just a little bit too far away from the Ad Nauseam to keep this hand because we have got no card selection to be able to reliably get us to a Soul Ring or a Mana Vault that's going to make this Ad Nauseam live. So I think we're going to ship and go to 4. Our 4 is Arcane Signet, Miscast, Brainstorm, Gitaxian Probe, Ledger Shredder, Gamble, and a Red Elemental Blast. This one is not going to do it. Got no mana sources. Let's go to a 3. Our 3 is Lotus Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond, a City of Brass, Vampiric Tutor, Alchemist Retrieval, Brainstorm, and a Faithless Looting. It's a pretty darn good 3. So it's very, very close. That Vampiric Tutor is really great. Gets us to our refueling source, but we're just 1 mana shy of being able to Wheel of Fortune or something like that. But I think in the situation that we're already at 3 here, I'm going to keep just Lotus Petal, City of Brass, and Vampiric Tutor, bottom everything else, and then we can Vampiric Tutor for a Wheel of Fortune if we happen to draw a mana source off the top. But at least the Vampiric Tutor is going to obviously remain flexible for us in whichever situation we find ourselves in, where maybe opponents before us in turn order have dumped their hands and we can no longer rely on this Wheel of Fortune to be our refueling source, and we need to pivot to a different game plan now, a different sort of advantage spell. That the Vampiric Tutor makes that a possible game plan, so that is a sort of 3 that I think I would like to keep. We've got City of Brass, which is, one of our best lands. We've got Lotus Petal to make that extra mana to help us fuel through to get to whatever refueling source that we need. If this was a 4, I think this would be a real banger. I would probably keep Brainstorm as my 4th, although Lion's Eye Diamond would be very tempting, but it's not going to help us cast that Wheel of Fortune, so probably keep the Brainstorm to try to spike the extra mana sources that we need to make this hand go off. But this is a fairly solid 3. I would keep this. Let's take a look at a fresh 7. Alright, fresh 7. Oof, got a lot of banger cards. 1 land would set this off. Our fresh 7 is Grim Monolith, Reign of Filth, Dark Ritual, Mystic Remora, Swan Song, Windfall, and Dockside Extortionist. It's got all the banger cards. It's got all the things that we need. It's got huge amounts of ramp, and it's got some refueling sources, but this is not quite where we're going to be. I think in the situation of that last hand, we might be likely to Vampiric Tutor for a Mystic Remora as our one advantage spell. Unfortunately, with this hand, we've got no mana sources, we've got no keep. I think even if we did have maybe, say, like Golden Opportunity would be Command Tower in place of the Reign of Filth if we're just changing a singular card. That gets us turn 1 Mystic Remora. It also leaves us in a place where we need to, 1, have Mystic Remora land, and 2, draw into a second mana source and be able to lose it turn 2 to be able to transition to Dockside, most likely Dark Ritual, Grim Monolith, and Windfall. But given that we've got no mana sources here, let's take a draw off the top. Let's do the Cardinal Sin. Talisman, punished. All right. Labricona, second 7. Second 7 is Gemstone Caverns, Odawara, Soaring City, March of Swirling Mist, Cyclonic Rift, Dress Down, Windfall, and a Rite of Flame. So this is a turn 1 Windfall, which is exactly where we want to be. We're at our second 7 here, so presuming that our Gemstone Caverns is live. This is hinging on the Gemstone Caverns being live. But if Gemstone Caverns is indeed live, 75% chance that it is, I think I would very likely exile. It's between Dress Down and Cyclonic Rift, and I think it would probably be Dress Down. Is a little bit more conditional, although it is a really fantastic spell. But it's not an instant or sorcery, so we're not going to be able to cast it out of our graveyard with Kess. We can cast it out of the graveyard with Underworld Breach, but there are very few situations in which we would be doing that. They do exist, but very few and far between. So Gemstone Caverns exiles the Dress Down, and then we've got a turn 1 Rite of Flame. Odawara is our land for turn, and Windfall, just fresh 7. Presumably someone kept 7. maybe a 6 or 5, but even if it is a 6 or a 5, you've seen how many times we've mulled a 3 already. We don't care if we've got a 6 or a 5. It's a lot more than the 0 that we've got here, basically. So we're transitioning this hand perfectly. This is Snap Keep on turn 1. All right, our next hand here is Arid Mesa, Chrome Mox, Cut Down, Mystical Tutor, Force of Negation, Red Elemental Blast, and a Wheel of Misfortune. So in this situation, I think this is a pretty safe keep. I think that I would turn 1 Arid Mesa, Chrome Mox, exile the Cut Down, and then before we get to turn 2, we can Mystical Tutor for a Dark Ritual. And then that leaves us in a space where we can cast turn 2 Wheel of Misfortune with an extra mana up, which is, it's fine. It's not the best way to cast your turn 2 wheel. Turn 2 Wheel of Misfortune is like, Wheel of Misfortune is by far the worst one in the deck. I know that lots of people don't like this card. I know that lots of people have suggested I go off of this card. Having the consistency of action spells in this deck is extremely important, and I have found Wheel of Misfortune to be well worth the awkwardness that the spell has just in and of itself and the way that it resolves. Like, another thing to consider is that we're a very hardcore Ad Nauseam deck, and Wheel of Misfortune costs you life. But I think the thing to consider is that not every game is going to be won by Ad Nauseam. Not every game you're going to spend your resources in the exact same way. So if we decide that our action spell this game is Wheel of Misfortune, that's what we're hedging our bets on, and that's what we're going to sink our life into. Losing 7 or 8 life to a Wheel of Misfortune to make sure that we're the ones that draw is a pretty minimal loss, especially if we are banking on the fact that we can more aggressively and more quickly deploy our resources post Wheel of Misfortune. So this isn't my favorite kind of wheel, but it is an acceptable wheel. And again, I think it depends on pod compositions, because we can get a much more aggressive wheel than this. We can get a wheel that leaves us with a lot more mana on our next turns, but having Chrome Mox to sort of bridge that gap a little bit is very helpful. That means we're also presumably going to have a land drop on turn 2 after the wheel, unless we also happen to pick one up on turn 1 with our first draw. So it's not my favorite keep, but I would keep this if I was feeling, if I felt like it would be good against the other decks at the table. And again, we want to think about pod composition and seating arrangement. If this was a turn, if we were like in first position or second position, I'd be very heavily inclined, I think, to keep this. If we were in third or fourth position, because we're banking on the Dark Ritual to get us to bridge that gap of mana, I think that this would probably be an unacceptable keep. So if this were an unacceptable keep, let's go ahead and take a look at our next one. This is our second 7. We've got Lotus Petal, Mox Diamond, Arcane Signet, March's Swirling Mist, Phantasmal Image, Rhystic Study, and Faithless Looting. So we've got the Lotus Petal for the Faithless Looting to try to spike a land here, but it's not a very good keep for this one. I think this is a pretty easy ship. Let's go to 6. 6, we've got Mana Confluence, Scalding Tarn, Flooded Strand, Dark Ritual, Demonic Tutor, Mystic Remora, and a Cyclonic Rift. So we've got Ritual and Tutor and Remora. I think that's probably enough action to be able to keep this on a 6. And I think I would likely drop the Flooded Strand. It could be the Cyclonic Rift, because I think that it is sort of dubious that we are going to put ourselves in the position that we need to Cyclonic Rift and like be the table police in this situation with this kind of a hand. But it does save us from losing to things like Opposition Agent, very specifically, or other things like Traneth Magistrate or Douthly Voidwalker that we otherwise can't deal with. The Cyclonic Rift is like a necessary evil keep, I think, in that situation. We are being a little bit greedy by bottoming a mana source, but presuming that our Mystic Remora lands and draws a couple cards, we do have the ability to like keep it on turn 2 and keep advancing our board state with the second land drop. I think that this is pretty acceptable. We can keep this one. Let's go ahead and take a look at one last hand. Fresh 7 here is Morphic Pool, Dark Ritual, Dress Down, Force of Will, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Red Elemental Blast, and Wheel of Misfortune. So we're missing our ability to flex between our colors here, so I don't think this one is a keep. Let's go to second 7. Second 7 is Vampiric Tutor, Reanimate, Cabal Ritual, Wishclaw Talisman, Delay, Rhystic Study, and Windfall. No mana sources, no keep. Going to a 6 here, we've got Fellwar Stone, Offer You Can't Refuse, Rhystic Study, Time Twister, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Rite of Flame, and Mnemonic Betrayal. Again, no mana sources, no keep. Mnemonic Betrayal is another one of those cards where I don't like to see it in the opener. It's not a card that you can very specifically play to on turn 1. This is what we want to pick up after a Wheel of Fortune effect. So let's go to 5 here. At 5, we've got Mox Diamond, Misty Rainforest, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Vault, Reanimate, Cyclonic Rift, and a Time Twister. Perfect snap keep. We're going to we're going to bottom the Reanimate and the Cyclonic Rift, and we're going to keep the Misty Rainforest, Mox Diamond, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Vault, and Time Twister. So if we spike the land on our first draw, which we're at 26 lands, so it's not incredibly likely, but if we do that, we are able to turn 1, Mox Diamond, Mana Vault, land, Time Twister, which is fantastic. Since we're keeping, let's see if we do draw the land off the top. And we get the Forbidden Orchard off the top. So yeah, we easily drop Forbidden Orchard to our Mox Diamond. The reason that we want to do that is because we do have days in the deck, and we want to keep that consideration in mind while we're moving through these hands and while we're moving through resources. Things like Daze and Mindbreak Trap are really great additions to the counter suite in this deck, where we don't want to be running Deflecting Swat or Fierce Guardianship. You'll notice that those 2 cards are absent from this list, although I think that they're both being run on the mid-range cast decks on the Decklist database. The reason that I'm not is because we're really leveraging the power of fast Grixis spells in this deck. We're not leveraging the power of Kess. Kess is a very, very good card. I love having Kess in the command zone. I love having her as a flexible way to win the game with Intuition. I love having her as a way to recur spells in the mid-game. But she's powerful enough on her own. We don't need to play into having her on the table, and I certainly wouldn't want to use the aggressive mana production that we have in this deck to get Kess on the table, unless I felt like it was really relevant against a Najeela deck or something like that. Kess is something, again, with the cards like Mnemonic Betrayal, Dragon's Rage Channeler, those are the things that we want to pick up resources for along the way, and not what we want to plan our first turn around. We want to plan our first and second turn around deploying our hand of mana sources and then refueling our hand, and then doing that until we find our win cons to win the game. So you'll notice on all of these keeps that we've had so far today that none of them have been, oh, this is turn 2 Thassa's Oracle Consultation, we immediately win the game. We're keeping hands based on theoretically getting us to Time Twisters and to Ad Nauseams, and those are the ways that we win the game. Basically, the Thassa's Oracle is the necessary evil to run in the deck, but picking up the resources and fueling ourselves more than our opponents can fuel themselves is what wins the game for us. So those are the kinds of hands that we're keeping, rather than this gets us specifically to our win con, because we've got all of these resources to reuse our resources. We can cast Time Twister again with Kess if we needed to. These are all things that we're keeping ourselves open to. So this is really great keep. And yeah, I hope that y'all enjoyed this Greedy Keeps episode with Kess. I love this deck. Absolutely. If you want to check out the deck list, it's right in the description link below. If you got any questions about it, make sure you leave them in the comments. If you got your own Kess deck that you want me to check out, make sure you let me know. Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up here on YouTube. And thanks so much for watching. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next time for Greedy Keeps. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, one of the best ways to support us is by leaving a comment and hitting that like and subscribe button. It's incredibly helpful and always appreciated. If you want to support the channel more directly, join our Patreon to catch episodes early, join our private Discord, and get some other awesome benefits. One final thank you to all of our patrons who make great content like this possible. And thank you for watching. Be good to yourself, everyone.